This is my Brunsviga Nova 2 that I bought on eBay, and this is the condition it was in when I bought it, which was rusty, paint peeling, locked and extremely dirty inside and out. Rusty parts had seized up the operating lever and the jaws at the side, and the counters were absolutely filthy. Everything was pretty hopeless and needed an awful lot of cleaning. The top rotor records the number of turns in either a plus direction or a minus direction. The second rotor is the input register that records the amount set up in the setting ring, and the bottom register at the bottom is the accumulator or output register. I soaked the whole thing in paraffin mixed with 5% oil, light oil, which freed everything up, left a very thick mucky residue on the bottom of the cleaning tank, but seemed to have removed most of the material that was causing a problem, and I blew compressed air through to remove most of the liquid residue and any remaining dirt that was lying around. There was no manual on how to take this apart and how to put it back together again. The whole of the outside is clad in aluminium sheet. The side sheets are spaced off from the main structure by small sections of tube that are not glued in place and simply fall away when the screws are taken out. I'm just going to do a video to show how to take this top rotor out. First thing to do is to take the little brass plate out and then undo the screws at each end. This one will take the pin out of here. Take the wheel off the end. Tight fit, that one. Take these screws out of the end support here. To lift that lever on the side up to enable that to come off, pull out the support, take the one out of this end, right, that's all of those out. Now the next thing to do, you need to weigh this down with something, and I've found that the roll grip's as good a way as doing this as any, and just leave that engaged so that it's pulling it down. Now what you have to do is to move the whole of this shaft in this direction so that it clears this end. Before you do that, of course you have to take this pin out at the end here. There we go, that's that pin. Right, we're now in a position to see about getting this out. You have to ease it over the spring at this end, and eventually you should be able to reach the point where you can get this pushed through enough. Just has to clear the end of this. There it comes. So that then comes loose and you can pull it out. So that's taken that out of there, where I thought when I first started that that would prove to be nearly impossible, but at the end of the day it isn't, and that's the logical way of doing it, and putting it in is the reverse of that. Now the problem I've found is that the spacing of these pulleys, or sorry, these display rotors, you can maybe be able to see this little glints of brass in between where I've put spacers in. The spacers aren't still quite thick enough, and at one end I need to thicken them out a little bit, and at this end it definitely needs quite a bit more. So I'm going to do that now and then reinstall the rotor. I'll do that off camera. To get the indicators off the end of here, you have to take the pin out of this end here, and when you do, it allows this, which is in a slot, to slide down the end of this here, so you can then take these off one at a time. But you can only take them off one at a time because they're like little teeth sitting off this shaft here. Now one of the reasons that the indicators don't fit very well is because of these lumps sticking out here, which are, I suppose, riveted ends of this that run through to this side. You can't cut them off flush, because if you do then this would fall off. So these are of varying heights, altering the thickness from one side to the other. So the whole thing is really not very well thought out, the way that that's secured on, so that the parts aren't parallel here and here, and there's uneven thicknesses here. So I'm trying to reduce all that by fitting spacers that sit inside those. Rivets that stick out, and that should get round the problem. Right, I've started to reassemble this back with the slightly thicker spacers in between these. Now I'll try and get this one back in. Hopefully this will go smoothly. Procedure is the reverse of what I did before. Now I've got the assembled rotor with all the parts on, and quite thick spacers at this end I've decided should work best. I've put in the pin at the end to secure the rotor, because it's a little tricky to get it in otherwise when you've got it all together. So I should be able to get that in, and it's the same procedure as getting it out. And I've got the mold grip just holding that down. There we are, that's gone in. Well, I've clearly got more work to do, but I am getting there, and I think the position of this transfer roller is the problem at the back here, because there are pins on here which move sideways. This of course is set by the carriage at the front, and it positions itself each time you index it along, so that's fairly straightforward. To get this out, you can get it out. There's a pivot point in there. If you take that out, you don't need to take the one at the other end out, and then this shaft is driven through from the end, and all you need to do is to just tap it, and then you can pull it out. That allows you to get this out, but you have to slide it to that end to make it come out. So I'm getting there, but I'm still not quite there. I've got more work to do, and when I've got it completed and I'm happy with its operation, then I can think about getting it painted. I've now made a whole lot more progress, and I've installed this after checking how it worked. That's now, I'm reasonably happy with it. It still could do with some additional spacers to stop these from slipping sideways and off the gear wheels there. It could have been slightly better designed, that, but never mind. we have what we have. Now I've put the transfer rotor back into the back of the machine. I've also played around with the spacings of these, and I put a 3mm spacer in here. I couldn't find a way of getting this rotor out, so I gave up on that, nor could I find a way of getting this one out. But perhaps some future person might like to oblige by showing us how they can be taken out. So if I just show you how this works now, if you set here an amount to add here, and you would rotate it forwards, now if I want to clear this top one, that clears it. If I want to clear this one, and that clears those as well as these. So that is the number that you're going to add to using these tabs on there. This records the number of rotations at the end here, and then for some reason it does that, which I haven't yet fully fathomed. It's something to do with the one at the back. There we go, that's that one working there. And now you have to be careful of the interlocks here, because you can't move anything once the interlocks are not engaging. So there's an interlock here, there's an interlock here, there's an interlock on the back here, and they all have to be in the right position. So that gets that back to 0. Still, I'm not quite understood how it all works, but I am definitely getting there. The most important thing to me was getting these to work. Why that's clicking over now, I've no idea. Shouldn't be. Oh, I know why. Right, I've finally got this working, I think, as it should be, before I put the carriage on. The key is that these numbers on the negative side go the opposite way around this wheel to the white ones. So if you're adding, you want to move them in that direction, and they start at number 0 across the row, and that's now cleared, and if I then turn it in a negative direction, it then turns all these round so that all of the negative numbers start at 0. Make sure that counter's on. So if I turn this round, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That should carry 1 across, and there it is, carried the 1 over, so that's now on 10, 11, 12 and so on. And then if I get this back to where the interlock is there, I should be able then to clear this. So that's cleared. This is at the right point, and I demonstrated that before, that was working correctly. So I'll just put a couple of those on. I'm going to turn this so that's just done 3 times the value of those. So I put that then there, I should be able to clear that, which I can. So those pop back here and those all go back to 0. And I can clear this, and that's back to 0 on the plus counter. It's rather confusing having 2 sets on here. I haven't yet figured out how it displays and changes the display, but so far this part of it is working. Now the key element to this, if you take one of these apart, is this drum here at the back. I called it a transfer rotor. I have no idea what its name is, but it's got all these pins on here, and this rotor has to be, it's got 1 row there and 1 row on the other side, and it has to be done so that it will allow the carry 1 digit onto the next row, otherwise it locks up. If you have it too far over, it then carries 2 to there, so it can lock up, it can carry 2, but you must get it so that it just carries the 1. And when you've done that, that's it set correctly, and there shouldn't be any need to take the rotor out again after that. So that's now, I'm pleased to say, got that part of it working. I can now put the carriage on and just see if it actually produces the correct answer, and I might just show a video of how the mechanism works up here. In fact, I'll do that next. Right, I've now gone on a bit further. I discovered when I put this rotor in, on the underside of here are cutouts that locate each of these counters, So rather to my surprise, that actually says that system works reasonably well. I left my spacers on in between so that they're located and there's very, very little movement, but enough so that when you're winding it up, it still works correctly. On this one, there isn't a brass bar, but you can't really see it, but the individual bars here are just down to locate the discs. So again, when you move this, they get located reasonably easily and reasonably well. So if I just turn that back there, and that's done to negative. Now the way that this part of it works, I've discovered, is on the back of here there's a little tab sticking out, and that goes into that slot, and then behind that slot is a spring, and this bar fits in there like that, and it moves position depending on whether you want negative or positive figures. So in this particular case it's in the negative because they're orange. So if I just put these two screws in, they've got shoulders on the screws so they don't tighten up. It's that little bar there. So if I clear this, just in the right position, you can see that the whole of this bar moves from one coloured numbers to the other depending on whether it's negative or positive. So if they're positive figures, or if they're going in a subtracted, if they're going as subtracted figures, then they show as orange. And actually all it's doing is there's a cam, this wheel here has got a cam shape in it, and as it turns around it moves a little pin on the back of where that screw is, and it moves this one way or the other. It's a very simple mechanism. One quick point on painting: when you're doing these numerals, they're very fiddly to do, and the only way to do them really is to put an approximate fill of paint in these, and then you just wipe them off with your finger. I saw on the internet someone doing them with a watch bezel like that, and that's easily the best way of doing them. If you get a little bit left smeared around, you can clean it off afterwards. So that's the front cover. Look quite smart. So I'm pleased with that. That's turned out well. So this is the addition direction, counting up however many turns there are. And when I get to 9 turns, the next one will be the 10th will carry over 8, 9, 10, 11 and so on. And when I've got the bottom carriage fixed on here, that'll then allow me to move where this goes, so I can do multiples of 10 or 100 or whatever after that. So if I take this round here, bearing in mind that these and where this lock is are where I stop, I can clear that, and I can run this backwards. So that's now going in a negative direction. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's done the carryover, so it's 11, 12, and exactly the same as before. So it works perfectly, does what it's supposed to be doing. So I am well pleased now. I can clear that. Just get that lined up, clear that. So this part of it is all functioning correctly. And I've now got the carriage to put on and check that that's working correctly. Right, I've now got it one stage further on. The upper register, that's working fine. This one, where you set the dial, set the positions of the counter on there, is working fine. And I can zero those, no problem. The carriage has been much more of a difficulty. I can't for some reason carry over 10 on the first row. Everything else works fine. So I think for the moment I'm just going to get it all together and check that everything works fine. If I just go back up here and take these off for a moment, I can show you how the carriage moves across to get it in exactly the right place or it won't work. There we go. Now I've not tightened this down properly yet, and I haven't put the extra screws in that hold that. And when that's on the first position, it's where this finger that comes down and hits the gear on the side of the counter. It's just on the side of the first counter as the first position. Right, so if I put this, I'll put these onto 7, I think. That's what I had it on just now. Oh, not the first one, the second one. 7. I do 77, and we'll do 77 12 times, say. Five, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 12 times. So 12 77s should be 924. And indeed 12 77s are 924. So I have made some progress. I'm very happy with that. You can, with this particular calculator, run it backwards. Once you've got to where they line up, you can unwind it, as it were, that way round. So that's 11, so I'm backing off one at a time now. Or indeed I can go back and add to it again once I've got to the point there. This morning I finally managed to free up the first position, so I've now got it all working as it should do. Thank goodness for that. So I can now think of putting the whole thing back together again. So if I just give you a demo, I'll set this to 55. So that's 10 turns, 55, 5550, 550. So that's all working correctly. That clears. That clears. And that clears. So I have a fully functioning calculator at last, and just a little bit of cleaning and oiling, and then I shall put it all back together. I've now completely finished work on this, and the one thing I've struggled with is the jaws here and this pin. This was all rusted up and seized solid when I got it, but I've worked on it now, taken all this apart, and there's a spring inside here that's very strong, that's difficult to fit in, and in the end I had to fit an external spring, which works, but it's not as convenient as the internal spring mount. The handles, the plating has chipped off a bit. I haven't done anything about that. So I just thought I'd take you through a couple of calculating exercises. If I want to calculate something by dividing, a nice one to do is pi. To calculate pi, the fraction is 355 divided by 113, and you need to move the carriage across. Now this is a little tricky on this to get this into exactly the right position. This has to push this little rod in here, which unlocks it if you get it in the right position. So if you put that on position 8, to make sure that's in correctly, and then start from there, 3, 5, 5, and put that in the positive direction, then clear the register. Clear that, and then enter the much you want to divide by, 1, 1, 3, and then you wind this backwards to divide. 1, 2, 3, and it pings, so that means you have to go back until it pings again. So that's 3 point for the pi figure, and you have to then move this onto number 7. I can get it there. There we go. So I think what I'm doing now, so that's 3.1, and I need to just move this along. To 6. So it's 3.14. I need to move this one more across. To 5. and then again. Moved the wrong way. So I've gone far enough now, as I'll just show where I'm up to. It's 3.141, that should be 5.9, and occasionally on this one it fails to count as I'm running through. The little lever that counts over sometimes misses, I noticed on these, which is slightly annoying, but it should be 3.14159, but that's pretty good. So I just need a little bit of work now on adjusting the lever, if I can find out how to do that. But there's a lot of movement between where this carriage sits indexed here and where this pointer is here. It goes on a long bar across the back, then up and then across, so it's slightly awkward. To calculate say the area of a circle of 27mm radius, so that's the radius squared. So if I put this at 27, turn it the right way, of course, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then move this to position 2. Right, that's on position 2, and now if I turn the crank again, 1, 2, so that leaves 27 up on here and 27 on here, and the answer is 729 on here. If I clear this and I clear this and I pull this lever at the side, I have to move it across first. Right, should work now. So if we pull this lever up, That's transferred the value of 729 from there into here. Now if I move across to position 5, so if I crank this 3 times, 1, 2, 3, then I move it back 1, and now if I crank this, so it's 3.1, and 3.14, so point handy to do this 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's 3.14, and a 1, 3.141, and 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 3.14159, and the answer here. This successfully completes the work on my Brunsviga calculator, and I'm pleased to get it to work. And it did take a lot of time, but enjoyment in the lockdown period.